in the middle of 1946, where he writes that if Subhash comes back at the head of a Russian army, Gandhiji cannot justify it neither to the Congress nor to the countrymen. It was essential for the establishment to keep Subhash dead. That's the first time Indians got to know about INA and Netaji, what Netaji had done. When the INA soldiers are put on trial, there is a revolt in the Royal Indian Air Force first. Immediately following that, there is a massive revolt in the Royal Indian Navy. The British realize that they have lost the loyalty of the main pillar of capturing India. But then in 1937, Mahatma Gandhi decides that for that year, there is no one else to be nominated as president. That the British, whenever they wanted to negotiate, they wanted to talk, they always spoke with Mahatma Gandhi. And 15th August is a matter of shame because that date was not chosen by our leaders. We didn't choose them. It was chosen by Mountbatten because that was the date of surrender of Japan.
Why doesn't this government ask you to come out and take your rightful place? And he answers, if I came out, a lot of innocents will die.
He also said that, see, if I come out, if I step out, these guys who are in power today, probably they would step aside and make way for me. But they will hold a grudge against me for their entire life.
He was always India first. So my national security, my national interests come first, and he was a mastermind, so to speak, in varieties of ways. And he, in one letter, he talks that the government of India can try for 7 generations, but Russians will never tell them about me because I have done so much, for them. They hold me in the highest esteem. Vajpayee ji probably met our man. So Vajpayee ji was there, Netaji's portrait came in Parliament only in 1978. The Congress never allowed. So every time we have had a non-Congress government in our country, something positive has happened concerning Subhash Bose. I understood from a former Chief Secretary of Gujarat that Modi ji is, whatever he may say publicly, privately he has soft corner for Netaji.
The Franklin Roosevelt, he says that when you give independence to India is your business, I don't want to meddle with that. But make sure that India stays in the Western orbit. नमस्कार मित्रों, आज मेरे साथ 2 मेहमान हैं। आप उनके नामों से परिचित होंगे ऐसा मैं मानता हूं। मेरे बाएं तरफ chandrachur घोष जी बैठे हैं। chandrachur घोष साहब ने बहुत सारा काम किया है नेताजी की बायोग्राफी पे। कई किताबें लिखी हैं। एक किताब मैं अभी पढ़ ही रहा हूं, द इनकन्वीनियंट नेशनलिस्ट करके है नेताजी के ऊपर। बहुत रोचक किताब है और उसमें बहुत सारी ऐसी जानकारियां हैं जो मेरे जैसे आदमी को, जो मानता है कि हिंदुस्तान की राजनीति को समझता है, मुझे भी नहीं पता थी। मेरे दाईं तरफ अनुज धर साहब बैठे हैं। इन्होंने अपना लगभग पूरा जीवन नेताजी की जो मिस्ट्री ही कहूँगा, उसको अनरैवल करने में अथक परिश्रम किया। अथक परिश्रम इसलिए कहता हूँ कि हमारी सरकार ने, जो विगत की सरकार रही है 1947 से लेके, उन्होंने कोई मदद उसमें नहीं की, बल्कि मैं ये कहूँ तो अतिशयोक्ति नहीं होगी कि अड़चनें ही डाली इनके काम में और उसकी सत्यता पता न चले इसके लिए बाधा ही बनी सरकारें। और सिर्फ यहाँ की सरकार नहीं, और भी जगह की विदेशों की सरकारों में भी इनको बहुत सहयोग मिला हो ऐसा नहीं है। तो इन्होंने अपने व्यक्तिगत प्रयास से इन्होंने ये काम किया है और मैं इसके लिए मानता हूँ कि इस तरह के लोग बहुत कम होते हैं। तो मेरे दोनों तरफ जो दोनों बैठे हैं, ये नेताजी के प्रेमी, भारत की सत्यता को जानने के अन्वेषी, और हम लोग भी इसी काम में लगे हैं। एक अरसे से हमारा भी यही प्रयास है कि भारत का जो नैरेटिव पिछले 70-75 साल से बनाया गया है, वो नैरेटिव में खोट है। खोट ही नहीं, वो एक गलत नैरेटिव हम लोगों को परोस दिया गया और हम उसको मानने लगे हैं। और अनुज धर साहब और chandrachur घोष साहब, इन जैसे लोगों ने इसमें मदद की है कि एक सच्चाई सामने आए। तो इसलिए मैं इनका बहुत शुक्रगुजार हूँ और आज हम लोग एक फ्री व्हीलिंग इनसे बातचीत करेंगे और ये जानने का प्रयास करेंगे कि इनके काम की प्रेरणा सबसे पहले कहाँ से मिली, ये मैं जानना चाहूँगा दोनों से। तो बारी बारी से पहले घोष साहब आप बताएं।
जी, एक्चुअली मैं तो बंगाल से हूँ, तो बंगाल में आप जानते हैं कि सुभाष चंद्र बोस एक ऐसा आइकन है जो इंस्पिरेशन है। हर किसी के घर पे आप चले जाइए, उनका फ़ोटो लगा हुआ मिलेगा आपको। बट मैं पहले ज़माने की बात जब कर रहा हूँ, जब मेरे बचपन में मेरे फैमिली से मुझे बहुत इंस्पिरेशन इसका मिला, क्योंकि मेरे ग्रैंडफादर जो थे वो एक फ्रीडम फाइटर थे। तो वो 16 साल की उम्र में देशबंधु चित्तरंजन दास के अंडर नॉन कॉपरेशन मूवमेंट में ज्वाइन किया, जेल गए उस टाइम पे। और पढ़ाई जब किए वही स्कॉटिश चर्च कॉलेज में पढ़े, जहाँ पे सुभाष बोस ने पढ़ाई किया था। तो वो 3 साल जूनियर थे सुभाष चंद्र बोस के। तो जब बाद में फॉरवर्ड ब्लॉक बनाया बोस ने, तो मेरे ग्रैंडफादर भी कांग्रेस छोड़ के फॉरवर्ड ब्लॉक ज्वाइन कर लिया, एकदम शुरू से फॉरवर्ड ब्लॉक के साथ थे। तो ये जो कनेक्शन है, ये कनेक्शन ने काफ़ी बड़ा रोल प्ले किया था। तो नेताजी के संबंधित जो लिटरेचर है वो मैं बचपन से पढ़ रहा हूँ, उनके बारे में जो डिस्कशन है वो डिस्कशन मैं बचपन से सुन रहा हूँ, तो एक आइडिया सा बन गया था। फिर ऐसा हुआ कि 98-99 में एक कमीशन ऑफ इंक्वायरी बनाया गया टू फाइंड आउट नेताजी का एक्चुअली क्या हुआ था। मौत हुई थी 1945 18 अगस्त में या नहीं, अगर मौत नहीं हुई तो क्या हुआ। तो एक नया फ्रेश कमीशन बनाया गया, तो उसका काम शुरू हुआ। तो उसको लेकर थोड़ा फिर इंटरेस्ट वो जाग उठा, पुराना इंटरेस्ट। तो उस टाइम पे हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स जो न्यूज़पेपर था दिल्ली से, एक ऑनलाइन वर्जन, एक पैरेलल इन्वेस्टिगेशन शुरू किया अराउंड 99-2000 से। तो उस पैरेलल इन्वेस्टिगेशन में मुझे पता नहीं था, तब मैं अनुज को नहीं जानता था। तो अनुज वाज प्लेइंग अ लीडिंग रोल एज अ रिपोर्टर, एज एन इन्वेस्टिगेटर। तो बहुत हद तक उनका जो फाइंडिंग था वो अनुज का फाइंडिंग है। तो वो मैं पढ़ता था और वो जो आया निकल के कंक्लूजन आया कि वो भारत वापस आए थे, पर पढ़ के उस टाइम पे जो इम्प्रेशन मिला कि भारत वापस आए थे पर सन्यासी के रूप में रह गए और बाहर पब्लिक लाइफ में नहीं आए। तो ये मुझे बात कुछ हजम नहीं हुई। मुझे बहुत आई वाज वेरी डिसगस्टेड टू रीड दिस काइंड ऑफ, आई थॉट दिस इज अनदर कंस्पिरेसी थियरी। वही मतलब घिसा पीटा स्टोरी को प्रोलॉन्ग करने के लिए बनाया जा रहा है, जस्ट टू गेट सम पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट रिस्पॉन्स, सेंसेशनलाइज द होल इशू। बाद में उसके बाद मैं यूके चला गया। तो यूके में रहते हुए अनुज का जो पहली किताब आया,
While you were studying there.
while I was studying there, तो वो अनुज का पहला किताब आया बैक फ्रॉम डेड। तो बैक फ्रॉम डेड पढ़ा मैंने, पढ़ के मुझे लगा कि ये लॉजिकल एक्सप्लेनेशंस तो है और फैक्चुअल काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें हैं, which me belonging to a family of revolutionaries, I knew the connections and the characters involved. तो फिर हमने ऐसा किया कि वी स्टार्टेड डिस्कसिंग इट ऑनलाइन कि क्या क्या हो सकता है, क्या नहीं हो सकता है। फिर ये करते करते जस्टिस मुखर्जी का जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन चल रहा था वो एंड तक आ गया, और जब ख़त्म हुआ और रिपोर्ट में पाया गया कि जस्टिस मुखर्जी ने नाकार दिया है उनकी मौत की जो स्टोरी है, और उन्होंने बोला कैटेगरिकली विथ एविडेंस बोला कि ऐसे कोई प्लेन क्रैश ही नहीं हुआ था, तो उनकी मौत की कोई सवाल ही नहीं है। तो सरकार ने उसको विदाउट एनी रीज़न रिजेक्ट कर दिया। तो तब हमें लगा कि ये केस तो ख़त्म, क्योंकि कोई इंटरेस्ट वाइडर सोसाइटी में कोई इंटरेस्ट नहीं मिल रहा था। तो वो हमारा स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट था। हमने वहाँ से हम बात करेंगे, जैसे आगे बात करेंगे और बताएंगे इसके बारे में, जो ट्रांसपेरेंसी कैंपेन हमने शुरू किया टू ब्रिंग आउट डॉक्यूमेंट्स इनटू द पब्लिक डॉक्यूमेंट, बिकॉज सारे डॉक्यूमेंट सीक्रेट थे नेताजी रिलेटेड। तो वो करते करते जब मिस्ट्री को हम इन्वेस्टिगेट कर रहे थे, तो मुझे इंटरेस्ट जो था नेताजी के बारे में जानने का, वो और पढ़ाई मैंने शुरू किया, डॉक्यूमेंट्स खोजने लगे, जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स मिलने लगे उसको पढ़ने लगे। तो मुझे ये एहसास हुआ कि नेताजी का डिसअपीयरेंस जितना बड़ा मिस्ट्री है, उनका लाइफ इज़ एन इक्वल मिस्ट्री। और इसमें जो पॉलिटिकल फिलोसॉफी का स्ट्रगल, द क्लैश ऑफ आइडियाज़ जो छिपा है, वो कभी उभर के सामने आया नहीं। सो दैट इज़ व्हेन आई डिसाइडेड दैट दिस इज़ समथिंग विच हैज़ टू बी डन, क्योंकि इसको अगर हम इस्टेब्लिश नहीं करेंगे तो मिस्ट्री के पीछे राज क्या है वो पूरी तरह से कभी एक्सप्लेन नहीं कर पाएंगे।
So you got into this fray and which year?
This was in 2004. 2004 is when we started discussing online and all. 2005 में हमने एक प्रेशर ग्रुप बनाया मिशन नेताजी के नाम पे। तो मैं यूके में था, अनुज वो दिल्ली में, और हमारे दोस्त बाकी कुछ दिल्ली में थे, कुछ त्रिवेंद्रम में। तो ऐसे करके पूरे दुनिया भर में थे, कुछ लोग यूएसए में थे, कुछ ऑस्ट्रेलिया में, इंग्लैंड में भी और भी लोग थे। तो ऐसे बनाया, बट हमने 5 लोग मिलके इसको एक मिशन नेताजी करके ग्रुप बनाया।
राइट। सो अनुज, मैं आपसे भी थोड़ा जानना चाहूँगा बहुत ब्रीफ में कि व्हाट गॉट यू इनटू दिस रिसर्च।
पवन जी, मेरा बैकग्राउंड चंद्रचूड़ जैसा नहीं है, पॉलिश नहीं है और इतना अच्छा भी नहीं है। मैं एक्सीडेंटली इस पूरे इशू में आया। एक छोटा सा कनेक्शन ये था कि मैंने अपने दादा को कभी देखा नहीं ज़िंदगी में, तो उनकी फ़ोटोग्राफ्स देखा था बहुत सारी, मेरी शक्ल उनसे बहुत मिलती है। तो दादाजी मेरे ब्रिटिश इंडियन आर्मी में थे, फ़ौज में थे। और जब बचपन में बड़े हुए तो बचपन सुनते आए थे उनसे कि अफ्रीका में लड़ने के लिए गए थे। उसके बाद से उनको बोला कि जापानियों से लड़ने जाना है, तो वो कोहिमा में जो CBI थिएटर जो बोलते हैं, चाइना बर्मा थिएटर जो उनका था, उनका अलाइड फोर्सेस का, वो वहाँ पे वो गए होंगे। और वहाँ जाकर के मुझे बताया गया बचपन में, घर वालों ने, बड़ों ने बताया कि वो उन्होंने वहाँ जाके उनको मालूम चला, क्योंकि उस टाइम भारत में नेताजी जब सन 41 में यहाँ से निकले थे तो सेंसरशिप लग गई थी। उस ज़माने में तो इंटरनेट TV सब था नहीं, सिर्फ न्यूज़पेपर हुआ करते थे। तो एक बार सेंसरशिप लगा दी तो लोगों के पास में कोई जानकारी थी नहीं कि सुभाष बोस क्या कर रहे हो, और वो किसी को नहीं मालूम था कि एक आज़ाद हिंद फ़ौज नाम की सरकार या आज़ाद हिंद फ़ौज है या आज़ाद हिंद सरकार वहाँ काम कर रही है और वो कोहिमा पे अटैक कर रहे हैं, कुछ भी हो रहा है। इनको भी नहीं मालूम था। इनको बोला गया था कि आप जाके लड़ाई करेंगे जापानियों के साथ में। वहाँ पहुँचते हैं तो वहाँ पे उनको लाउड स्पीकर से आवाज़ आती है दूसरी तरफ से कि आप हमसे क्यों लड़ते हैं, हम तो आपके भाई हैं। तो जो मुझे बताया गया घर में कि इन्होंने लड़ने से मना कर दिया लोगों ने वहाँ पे कि लड़ाई नहीं करेंगे। मेरा ग्रैंडफादर वाज मिसिंग इन एक्शन फॉर 3-4 days, so for a week about, I'm sorry, more than that, 3 people got missing in action. My grandfather was presumed dead. My dadi became vidwa for some time. So it was a big tragedy. Any family which has this kind of an experience, usually at least for 2 generations, people don't forget this thing. So उसके बाद में, लेकिन he came back from the dead and he was like he lost his health because he had to eat grass to survive. 2 people died. तो मुझे बचपन से ये हल्का सा आइडिया था. I was not a studious person all my life. If I told you how many marks I scored in history, you would probably not continue this interview. And but मुझे बचपन से ये हल्का सा आइडिया था कि भारत के आज़ाद होने में सुभाष बोस की भूमिका नंबर 1 है, क्योंकि अंग्रेज इस देश पे राज कर रहे थे भारत की फ़ौज को इस्तेमाल करके, और उसी फ़ौज की वजह से, फ़ौज के अंदर सुभाष बोस की वजह से देश की फ़ौज में अंग्रेज़ों के खिलाफ में वो रिवोल्ट की नौबत आ गई थी. दैट वाज दी बैकग्राउंड, नथिंग एल्स, एवरीथिंग वाज एक्सीडेंटल. तो मैं कोई बहुत ज़्यादा इंटरेस्टेड भी नहीं था, कुछ ज़्यादा मुझे पता भी सुभाष बोस के बारे में था. इनकी तो खैर इनके दादाजी उनके साथ में थे. आई हैड नो कनेक्शन. मेरे जब मैं पैदा हुआ मेरे पिताजी क्लर्क थे, बाबू कॉलोनी में रहते थे, नॉर्मल गवर्नमेंट स्कूलों से पढ़े, सब कुछ हुआ नॉर्मल. और इट वाज जस्ट एन एक्सीडेंट कि मैं हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स में नौकरी कर रहा हूँ. थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्ट हुआ था सुभाष बोस को लेकर कि वो उस टाइम मुखर्जी कमीशन काम कर रही थी, तो सीनियर ने बोला कि आप इस पर एक इन्वेस्टिगेशन करते हैं और इस पर काम करेंगे, और उसमें लग गया. अब वो करते 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 कुछ और भी माहौल उस टाइम पे, कुछ अपनी पर्सनल भी ऐसी सिचुएशन बनी कि वो करते करते मैं उसमें अंदर घुसता चला गया. और वहाँ पे जाकर के जो टर्निंग पॉइंट आया कि हम सब लोगों ने 4-5 लोगों की टीम थी, ये कंक्लूजन में सीनियर लोग थे मेरे साथ में. सितांशु दास हमारी टीम के हेड थे, वो पुराने नेताजी के बायोग्राफर थे, BBC वगैरह में काम कर चुके थे, पुराने बड़े जाने माने पेट्रियट के एडिटर रह चुके थे. तो ही वाज सीनियर जर्नलिस्ट एंड ही हैड अ कनेक्शन टू नेताजी. बंगाली भी थे, वो हमारी टीम के हेड थे. करते करते कंक्लूजन ड्रॉ किया कि प्लेन क्रैश में डेथ की जो कहानी बोली जाती है वो ठीक नहीं है. तो मुखर्जी कमीशन ने हमको हियरिंग के लिए बुलाया. मेरे लिए कोई भी नॉर्मल आदमी, मिडिल क्लास का आदमी या लोअर मिडिल क्लास का, आपको बुलाया जाए उनके सामने, कमीशन में गवाही दे. मैं गवाही देने जाता हूँ तो वहाँ देखता हूँ कि प्रणब मुखर्जी भी वहाँ पर हैं. तो वो विटनेस नंबर 48 थे, मैं विटनेस नंबर 50 था. आई थिंक विटनेस नंबर 51 बस कुंवर नटवर सिंह जी, बिकॉज उनकी मैंने गवाही सबकी देखी है. तो बड़ा एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी एक्सपीरियंस है हम जैसे हमारे जैसे लोगों के लिए, इस बैकग्राउंड से, छोटे घर से आने से देखने के लिए. और वो जब हुआ करके तो उस टाइम पे मेरे तो बाकी लोगों ने तो अपना दे मूव्ड ऑन. मैं थोड़ा सा आई बिकेम लिटिल बिट डिप्रेस्ड बिकॉज वंस वी हैव confirmed, we have in a sense that we have confirmed that we have at least the Hindustan Times investigation that Subhash Bose did not die in any plane crash. So then what happened to him? And the only and the dominant view back then was there was this rumors about Netaji being in Russia and dying in a dungeon in Soviet Russia. You must have heard because just about everybody knew about these things in those days. तो बड़ा बुरा लगा कि यार इतना हमारे देश का नंबर 1 फ्रीडम फाइटर, उसने इतना, और वो इतनी बुरी मौत जाके मरा हो रूस में किसी डंजन में. It's very sad. What do? I am nobody. I'm not I was basically a desk journalist. I was not even a reporter, and I have no access to any means or any this thing. But the only advantage I had the Hindustan Times branding, and I was like in Delhi. Delhi is a place where you have all the secrets. So I took an approach. It was out of sheer desperation, nothing special. There's no great shakes on my part. That suppose I met you, and I somehow you are my friend or somebody. I know you somehow, and I think that you are somebody who has a link in the PMO, and you know somebody. I would ask, do you know somebody in the PMO? You know somebody? Do you have a relative in the IB? Please talk to him about Subhash Bose. Tell me, ask. I want to know something. So by and by, this is how I began collecting some data here and there. Because people, for example, those specially serving in the intelligence, you cannot get anything out of them. But suppose somebody is in the IB and his daughter were to put him a question. I will probably give an example of it later when we talk. Similar example coming from the Prime Minister. Obviously, the person cannot dodge his own daughter, or probably even if he or she to dodge, the other person would figure it out. There's something wrong. So by and by, I started getting some inputs. There's something big about this case, but it was not very clear. And one day, by fluke, I can make up stories today, but I will not. It's a fluke. I was just shooting in the dark, and I hit, and I was able to reach through some connection. Somebody who had seen the files, and the highest level. The source was at the highest level, almost like Deep Throat. You might have heard that Washington Post and Watergate story, and it's almost like that, almost very very movie like.
Which year?
This was 2001-ish, and then and then I was given to understand that this is India's best kept secret, and that he was alive, he was in Russia, and then they gave me to understand that the government of India was in touch with him until 1985 and told me certain other things which are very explosive, which I can't possibly talk to you right now. Probably off the camera we'll talk. And I couldn't believe. I couldn't believe. I said, what's happening? Netaji was dead one view in 45 in a plane crash in Taiwan, and suddenly and the other view was that Netaji died in Russia in Stalin's time. Stalin died in 53. Right. So either way, it was my grandfather's time. And when you say that we were in touch with him until 85, my God, this comes to my time. This is Rajiv Gandhi's era. And the first thing I did was to just figure out how old was Netaji. Because we talk of Subhash Bose, Netaji, we tend to, we think of him and Gandhiji and Sardar Patel and Panditji in the same breath. Yeah. But there's a huge difference. People do not know. Sardar Patel was 22 years older than Subhash Bose. Right. Gandhiji was probably 29, Chandrachur can tell better.
69, he's 97.
So he's 29 years old. Back in those days, people used to become parents in early 20s. And then, so Morarji Bhai was probably a year older than Subhash Bose, and he became our Prime Minister in 78. So yes, it's feasible for Subhash Bose to be alive, because if he were there until 85, he would have been 88. So that, since biologically it's not impossible for him to be alive. And since then, and I went to, of course, Mukherjee Commission went to, Ayodhya, where, and there was a hearing, I went there. And from that time and then, of course, Chandrachur and others, we all joined in, and he and I were not childhood buddies. We got together because of this job. When I heard this information from the government sources that he was here, the whole thing has been checked and rechecked and verified and re-verified by Chandrachur and Shayantan and so many people. And people like those in Ayodhya and Calcutta, known to us for like decades now, 2 decades almost. Every month, even last month, we got a new input. Not a single input, not a single thing has come our way, has gone against that story. So we are 100% convinced about whatever I heard in 2001. And because we keep getting updates, and they have verified and re-verified independently. Right. So whatever I heard in 2001 was correct according to me, and which has been, over a time period of time checked and rechecked. This is how I came. But my coming, here was completely accidental. As I told you that if I told you how many marks I had in history, you would not like to continue this interview.
Yeah. No, but we are going to have a presentation by both of you in the afternoon, and where you are going to be talking, and you've done a lot of talking about your research work and about your knowledge about Netaji. What I would like to explore here is, from 2001, 2002, you've been involved in doing research, finding out things, and it's a long time. And it's been almost, if I wouldn't be wrong if I say that this has been your the biggest passion in your life since for the last 20
Absolutely.
years, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it has occupied your mind space, so to say. I envisage that someone who
I think it is going to remain with us till we die now. There is no way now.
So someone who does like that, then something happens to the way you perceive things. You start connecting dots. You start seeing things in a different way. This is my assumption. So I want to explore that side of it.
Realization also comes in phases. It does not dawn on you just one
Immediately.
fine morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a slow, continuous process. Yeah. So what is your feeling? About that. We have only read from books and from magazines and all that there were differences between Netaji and Gandhiji, and of course Nehru and Netaji hardly got along with each other. That is quite anyone who knows a little bit about Indian history and politics would know this. I mean, this is the perception which is there, but it doesn't still give us that idea that where their differences so strong that even after his disappearance, I would say, I wouldn't call his death in 45, his disappearance, and it's quite well known now that the government of India knew about it. Why was nothing done? In fact, things were done to the contrary to keep it the way it is. And then my question is, and this is a long question, why did Netaji not come out? Was it because of the persecution by the international agencies only, because he was a war criminal, or was it something deeper than that?
We have to take the question in two parts.
These
are actually two questions.
Yeah.
The first part is why the attitude of the Indian political establishment towards Netaji. And the second part is why Netaji did not come out. Both are very complex answers.
Right.
So it will take some time. I will go into the first part. Anuj can add, and when I will ask him to take the second one, and I will add whenever required. So see, one thing is the differences, the attitude of the political establishment in free India, independent India, was not a contemporary attitude. It had built up over years. And it started in the late 1920s when Subhash Bose comes out of Mandalay jail from Burmese prison. He returns. On his return, the very next session of Bengal Provincial Congress conference, he is elected the president of Bengal Provincial Congress. And that is 1927, end of 27, 28, early 1928. Before that, in 1927 December, I mean, most people don't know it. When we talk about independence resolution by the Congress, we talk about the Lahore Congress of 1929-30. We don't, most people don't know this, that the first independence resolution was moved by Jawaharlal Nehru in 1927, Madras Congress. So in Madras Congress, Gandhi was not majorly involved. Pandit Nehru moves the resolution that the goal of Congress is complete independence of India. And the resolution is passed. So what happens is this changes the creed of the Congress. And Gandhiji was mightily annoyed. He said, how could you do this? This is foolish. And they had a long clash, meeting face to face and through letters.
So pardon my intrusion, but one thing I want to just add to this, what he's saying, the background for the sake of clarity. Panditji and Subhash were very good friends back in 27. So Netaji and Panditji were not at loggerheads until 1936-37. So this time when it was happening, Panditji and Subhash were very good friends.
In fact, I mean, they were not very good friends in 27-28, but they were coming together. They were getting to know each other. Panditji was a little senior than Subhash in the Congress politics. And under Deshbandhu Chittaranjan, they had been moving around, seeing each other, talking and getting to know each other. And then Subhash goes away to prison, so there is a long gap. So when he comes back, so Mahatma Gandhi is mighty annoyed with this resolution, and he charges Pandit Nehru as to this is a foolish thing, how could you do that? And then Pandit Nehru refuses to step back and say, then Gandhiji issues the threat that if you believe in this, then it's fine, you go your way, I go my way. Then something happens which keeps happening, recurring throughout Pandit Nehru's career and Mahatma Gandhi's career. Pandit Nehru completely, abjectly surrenders. He said, no, You are like my father, and how can I go against you? So whatever you say is the final word. He gives in. So that independence resolution gets buried. What Subhash does is he picks up that independence resolution and passes it as the Bengal resolution in 28 March, April. And then he brings it along to the Calcutta Congress. The Congress annual session was held in Calcutta in 1928, December. So there
When
he...
Nehru became the president,
No,
right?
that was Motilal Nehru was the president that year. Nehru became the president,
Next year.
next year.
Oh.
Mahatma Gandhi wanted Jawaharlal Nehru as the president, but Bengal wanted Motilal Nehru because Motilal Nehru was very close to Chittaranjan Das. So they thought that Chittaranjan Das's place could be taken by Motilal Nehru. They pressed for it and Mahatma Gandhi gave in. So Subhash went hammer and tongs asking for the complete independence. This thing said dominion status cannot be our goal, and that there lies the basic fundamental difference between the two. Mahatma Gandhi was okay with dominion status. Subhash Bose was complete independence, free from British influence. Not he was not anti-British as is portrayed by many historians and writers. He had many good things to say about the British qualities and everything, and he would give examples in his public speeches. So it was not private, secret, anything, but out of British influence. India should develop on our own and become free on our own and go on our own path without British influence. That was the beginning, and this kept deepening. This divide kept increasing. Then Subhash was again sent out in exile in 1930s. 1933 he went out and spent another 3 years. He had to spend, he was forced to spend in exile in Europe for 3 years. And he was stopped from coming back to India, but he forced his way back. He was forced his way back in 1936 and he was again arrested and thrown back to jail, of course. But then once he comes out of jail, his health is in a very poor state. But then in 1937, Mahatma Gandhi decides that for that year there is no one else to be nominated as president because Pandit Nehru had been president for the previous 2 years. Patel had refused to become the president. So willy-nilly let it be Subhash. There is nobody else for this year. He says that. But at the same time, he writes to Sardar Patel in a letter that I don't find Subhash trustworthy at all. But for this year, there is nobody else. So the idea was to fill in the gap, let him be president, we will control everything, and things will move according to our ideas. And after 1 year, we will reappoint either Pandit Nehru or Maulana Azad or Patel, somebody will come. So what happens in 1938 is Subhash Bose comes in with his set of ideas. In his presidential speech at Haripura, it's a masterpiece, that speech. So he lays out not only the route for the freedom struggle, but he lays out the vision for building independent India. So this is another fallacy, I would say, a very willful lie spread by many writers that Subhash was so engaged about India's winning freedom that he did not have any time to think about free India's development. That's completely bunkum. He had a very detailed thought process. He was a thinker. He was not only a street fighter or a run-of-the-mill politician. He was a thinker, a very well-read, erudite thinker. And he had a vision, proper vision, how India should develop after freedom. So he lays out his vision. And there, in that, he talks about modern ideas. He talks about science and technology. He talks about industrial development of India. Decides for the planning committee to lay the path for India's industrial development. He talks about population control. He talks about education, health, agriculture, rejuvenation of agriculture, financing, how to finance agriculture. So all the issues that we are talking about today, it is kind of eerie. It gives an eerie feeling to read his 1938 speech. He was looking at those particular problems. And now this speech unnerves the Gandhian camp because of moving. They thought that they are moving away from the village industry, the village life kind of thing, idea. And Gandhi, anyway, Subhash is hobnobbing with the revolutionary groups. He's mobilizing. By that time, he had set up youth and student groups, whom he was training in a almost a military fashion. So that was an anathema to the Gandhian camp. So all these things put together, and he was also reaching out to foreign powers. So his 3 years in Europe exile, he utilized that time to build his network in Europe, to get ideas, assimilate ideas. I mean, one of the ideas that he's brought in here was municipal socialism, that municipalities in India should be self-sufficient. They should not depend on outside funds and all. They should be able to generate their own strength, funds, and get the best of talent to develop the towns. And these were not appreciated by the Gandhian High Command. So by end of 1938, it was already decided that he was going, and uh, somebody else will have to be. So Gandhiji had already started sending out feelers to Jawaharlal Nehru, to Maulana Azad, that what about next year? You get in next year. And that time Subhash puts his foot down and says that I have given you a plan. I have laid out a plan for Congress. Give me one more year. I need one more year to finish the work that I have started. So they tell him, no, you can just you are an important leader. So as an important leader, you can carry on work. He said, no, there is a difference. So I have, as a president of the Congress, I have laid out a path, and I need that space to be able to take everyone along with me. And by the time Congress had also gone into power in the provinces after the 1936-37 elections under the new Constitution of India, the India Act of 1935. So he was interacting with the industries ministers, the premiers of the provinces, and discussing with them how to take forward, how to give incentives to industrialists and build new industries. Everything he was discussing. He said, I need all these things. And while this is going on, then in the next Bengal Provincial Congress, he sponsors a new resolution. He says, let's give the British Empire, the British Raj, 6 months ultimatum. In 6 months, if they don't show any sign of leaving India, then we will start a massive movement. And everybody in Congress High Command, starting from Gandhi, goes rabidly against it. They were just not ready to accept it. Gandhiji's talk phrase at this time was that the Indian movement will have to be non-violent, and there is too much violence in the air. India is not prepared, and unless everybody in Congress has become in mind, body, spirit non-violent, I will not start a movement. So there begins the clash. Then this clash turns into a bitter fight, and Subhash is forced to leave Congress. He starts his forward bloc within the Congress, then forward bloc goes out of Congress as a separate party. He starts building a left unity, tries to build a left unity in India. By that time, the World War starts. And when the World War starts, Subhash Bose is the only person who is saying that let's take the opportunity, hit out at the British at their weakest time, and get our own freedom. On the other hand, Gandhiji is meeting Linlithgow, the viceroy at that time, and saying that I can't even bear the thought of the Westminster being bombed. He was crying. Tears were flowing down his cheeks, and these are written in the minutes. So he was choking, he was crying, he was weeping. And so that was the difference. And then Subhash Bose starts building network with the Axis powers through Japan. The Germans are coming and meeting him. And all these things, there's a very funny incident actually. There was a Nazi minister who was deputed to India as a commerce representative. And he has a meeting with Subhash Bose in Bombay. Now the British intelligence spots this. They prepare a report. They send the report to the Premier of Bombay, B.G. Kher, the Home Minister of Bombay, K.M. Munshi. What K.M. Munshi does is, he receives the report, he sends it to Gandhiji. So look at the flow of information. The British intelligence, K.M. Munshi, Gandhi. This is how information was flowing. And they are flabbergasted, they are shocked that Subhash is talking to the Germans, because by this time there was a very internationalist, peace-loving spirit which had overtaken, because of Gandhiji's thoughts, overtaken the Congress, that we stand for world peace and we don't care anything about anything, but England has to win the war, the Allies have to win the war, the Axis has to be defeated. They were not bothered that the Axis was actually supporting India's freedom. So Subhash was taking the other stand, that the Axis is supporting us, let's reach out to the Axis, let's reach out to Soviet Union. Soviet Union had signed a pact, an alliance pact with the Axis powers. So he says, well, Soviet Union is with them, they are supporting us, why not reach out to them? So this widens the rift. And then Subhash is thrown to jail because of his aggressive politics, and he realizes that if I stay in the country, I will be rotting in jail as long as the war lasts. So he decides that this is the time. And then he leaves the country. Many people think that he planned the exit sitting in jail, which he was arrested in 1940 July, and he left the country in 1941 January. So many people think that he was planning after July sitting there. No, he was a person who used to always plan much ahead. So he had started planning going out of the country and taking help from foreign powers from 1939 this November. So he had actually planned it for 1 year, sent out his agents to to find out the best route to Russia through Afghanistan, through South China coast, through Japan. His man had gone to Japan, talked to the German embassy there, the Russian embassy there. So everything he had reached out, building his network and trying to zero down on one plan. So then he leaves the country, goes to the Axis, and then the Congress is at the peak of their campaign against the Axis. So they didn't care about India's freedom at that time. They're saying that we are not going to help you with manpower. They were telling the British that we are not going to help you with manpower and resources till the time you are giving us freedom. But as long as you share some power, we are happy to give you our manpower and resources. So we are on your side. So that one has to keep that in mind, that Subhash was not on the side of the Allied powers. He was against them. The Congress was on side of the Allied powers. So all those, the Congress leaders, the bureaucrats who continued to rule India after freedom, they were all on the side of the Allied powers. Subhash was standing alone. And then he does something unthinkable when, because of the Quit India movement, everybody, all Congress leaders are imprisoned. And the whole so-called Gandhian movement turns into a terribly violent underground movement. That underground movement starts supporting Subhash. They make plans that if the Japanese army comes with Subhash at its head, how they will welcome, how they will join the forces and drive the British out. So all these things happening, Subhash was day in, day out becoming a more bitter enemy for them. So Jawaharlal Nehru's well-known quote that if Subhash comes at the head of a Japanese army, I will fight him with a sword. This is a public statement. And so Gandhiji was turning a little soft, hearing, according to Maulana Azad's testimony, that he was so much influenced by his resourcefulness, by his bravery, by his quick thinking. He was turning a little soft. But then he also again went back to his old self. But when 45 came, the war ended. Congress as an organization was completely demolished. There was no organization. There were a few leaders. And the moment they were released, entire focus was on negotiation with the British government on how to get some share of the power. What is the best way to get some share of the power? There was no focus on mass movement. Right at that time, the INA soldiers were being brought in. And as soon as people got to know, Anuj referred to their blackout, the censorship of news of Netaji and the INA. That's the first time Indians got to know about INA and Netaji, what Netaji had done. And the soldiers are coming back. They are telling their stories to people. So there was a volcanic eruption throughout the country, across the country. And that wave reaches the Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army. And the British are unnerved. They are seeing something that they could not even imagine. And immediately, as the mass movement starts on the INA trials, when the INA soldiers are put on trial, there is a revolt in the Royal Indian Air Force first. Immediately following that, there is a massive revolt in the Royal Indian Navy. And this spreads. And the British realize that they have lost the loyalty of the main pillar of capturing India, the armed forces, British Indian armies. So at that time, Auchinleck is writing for reinforcements from the home, which is England, and he is writing that send us more troops, but be careful that all of them must be British. The troops must not contain Indians.
They don't trust Indian soldiers anymore.
So
that's quite well taken, But what I was trying to explore with you was that why such this thing that to keep Netaji under wraps, not to bring him out. I mean, they are working overtime, it seems.
I'm coming to that. I'll just tie up the argument.
This is after post-independence.
Yes, so I'm tying up the thing. So when all these revolutions and mass movements are going on, what are the Congress leaders doing? They are going out, working extra hard to suppress them. They're saying that we are about to get power in our hands, don't create disturbances. Calm down. So the uprising, they stop. in the hope that the British will hand over power to them. So there is a negotiation process from 45, end of 45 till 1947, August, when the transfer of power happens. India becomes a dominion. Had Subhash Bose, whatever he stood for, is completely against the process that went on for those 1.5 years or 2 years. So Subhash Bose, Subhash Bose's ideas were thrown out to the dustbin. We got a negotiated transfer of power on 15th August, and 15th August is a matter of shame because that date was not chosen by our leaders. We didn't choose them. It was chosen by Mountbatten because that was the date of surrender of Japan. So a date of shame for another country was chosen as the date for transfer of power for our country. So all these things, the negotiation, the compromises, Subhash Bose, while he was in Germany and in Southeast Asia, in his broadcast, kept repeating that, telling people that beware of the leaders of Congress, they will compromise at the earliest available opportunity. And that is exactly what happened. They compromised. And so Congress leadership knew that if Subhash Bose comes back, then they stand no chance, because Subhash Bose had by that time attained a superhuman image. His popularity was at a scale where nobody came close to it. So everybody was taking his name. Everybody is taking the name of INA soldiers. Everybody is taking his name, utilizing him, exploiting his name. But Sardar Patel writes very interesting letter to the Premier of Orissa at this time. He says, praise the INA by all means.
But
do whatever you can, but don't take the name of Subhash. No need to praise the leader. So the attitude is clear. They have to stop Subhash from coming, because Subhash comes in, they are gone. They have to play a secondary role, a second fiddle. And they knew, or they were not sure at that time, probably they came to know later that he was alive, but at that time they were not even sure that he was dead. Most probably not, because there were many incidents where he was declared dead and he came back. So he might come back. So that fear and the betrayal, the betrayal always produces guilt. So that sense of guilt, and to preserve the show that we did the best for the country, for that they have to keep Subhash out. Subhash Bose's ideas and activities, everything, if they are given the light of the day, they cannot justify themselves. So that is what a letter written by Gandhiji's secretary to Khurshid bin Noraji, to Louis Fisher, his biographer, in the middle of 1946, where he writes that if Subhash comes back at the head of a Russian army, Gandhiji cannot justify it neither to the Congress nor to the countrymen. So that's the thought process behind it. So it was very important to kill Subhash, to make him disappear. And his thoughts, his ideas, his visions to make that disappear, to keep him as a peripheral figure, also ran kind of figure. And that continued, that built up even when the government came to know that he was alive in all likelihood, and they did not have a clear idea, they did not have clarity. But it was essential for the establishment to keep Subhash dead.
I mean, I'm trying to also give one input, because I want you to see if there's a connect there. I was reading some of the British documents of pre-independence days, and there is a document where it's documented, where there's a conversation between the American president, Franklin Roosevelt, in 42, with the British ambassador to United States. Right? And the conversation takes place in the White House. And he says something like this, the Franklin Roosevelt. He says that when you give independence to India is your business, I don't want to meddle with that. But make sure that India stays in the Western orbit. Yeah. Now, this is, I think, a very, very major statement, that make sure India stays in the... Something tells me very strongly that installation of Pandit Nehru as the first Prime Minister of India was part of that, to keep India in the Western orbit.
That you are right, and it will become clear.
And I feel that to keep Subhash Bose away is also part of the same thing. It's part of the same thing. So if that be so, you see, we make this differentiation between Cold War America on one side, USSR on one side. But as far as India was concerned, I think there's a tacit understanding between these powers on how to run India,
I'll just
how
answer
to
in
take
a
it forward.
brief line.
And
Then let Anuj take up.
Subhash Bose is probably part of that strategy, and Nehru is part of that strategy,
Yeah.
and the whole Gandhi Parivar is part of that strategy. What do you have to say
Yeah,
to
I'll
that?
just finish it off in a sentence, and then Anuj will link it up with why he didn't come out.
The only one point I want to make, he's beginning to sound like Gumnami Baba. It's exactly what Gumnami Baba detailed actually. Whatever you just said just now.
Uh-huh.
So that's what.
Please elaborate on that.
It's
I'll
like
be
he-
interested.
So he used a term JLN, UK, USA combined. So Jawaharlal Nehru plus UK plus US combined.
Even USSR at that time. Because you see, this alliance, we came into the, let's say, I mean, if there's a mafia, okay, mafias tend to divide their territories, right?
Yeah.
They are fighting each other, but as far as their territories, this is my territory, this is your territory, we won't fight amongst each other, we are enemies, but let's be, something like that happened after the Second World War.
After the Second World War, yes.
They divided their territories.
The answer for your this hypothesis, and which is valid, is can be found in India's joining the Commonwealth. So when India gains independence or India transfer of power happens, the Congress goes back on two of its central promises. The first promise of Congress, or the first demand of Congress, was complete independence by dissociating from the UK.
Purna Swaraj.
Purna Swaraj, complete independence. Congress goes back on that, takes dominion status, accepts dominion status. The second thing that Congress always claimed, that we will not be part of the Commonwealth.
Right.
Overnight, they change their stance and they go and join the Commonwealth. And there is a desperation to join the Commonwealth. Not only join the Commonwealth, but the desperation to join the Commonwealth. And the British also negotiate. They also make some compromises. They make some discounts to get India into Commonwealth. So once India gets into Commonwealth, it's in the Western Allied bloc completely. And by that time, Soviet Union had broken away. And Soviet Union sponsored or inspired communist movement had become the main enemy of the present day Indian government. So the demarcation was clear. So although Pandit Nehru is claiming that we are non-aligned, but he is in the Commonwealth, he is in the Western Bloc. So there he has to unfortunately ask for aid from the US. He has to ask for grains, food grains. He is going through famines.
PL4.
India doesn't have enough cloth.
Yeah.
So he has to get those things. In UK is the biggest arms supplier. So they and it's in their interest. It's in the interest of the allied forces, the Western democracies, to prop up Pandit Nehru, to see that the transition is smooth according to their convenience. But not only that, the power remains in the hands of people who they can negotiate with and talk to. So the tradition followed that the British, whenever they wanted to negotiate, they wanted to talk, they always spoke with Mahatma Gandhi. They never spoke with the revolutionaries. They never spoke with Subhash Bose. They never opened a negotiation with Subhash Bose. They spoke with Gandhi. So whatever the situation was, Gandhi was the preferred person they could talk with. So Pandit Nehru became the displaced Gandhiji in the modern India, in the free India. Gandhiji was not there anymore.
Our man in Delhi.
Our man in Delhi.
But Nehru is being cultivated from 1928, I mean, he's their man from that time. He's being cultivated, definitely. I mean, he moves around in the most elite crowds of England. Tell me, one friend that Pandit Nehru has in India. I have been researching friend. I'm not talking of acquaintances. I'm not talking. No, male or female. You tell me one. See, female friend, flippant relationships, I'm not interested in that. I'm talking of a real friendship. Not one single person, either male or female, in India. But you can name 10 or 20 people in England, in the high society, who are good friends of Pandit Nehru, with whom he's relaxed. He's comfortable, he laughs, he can joke, he can share. Not one in India.
That's something
this
which
is
happened.
Something which happened from the time he's gone to Eton.
See, I don't, I am very critical about Pandit Nehru's role post 1939, after the Second World War started. But even before that, or sometime after that also, I can't overlook that he had a very strong streak of anti-imperialism. So he had an inner disgust for imperialistic traditions. I'll just explain. But he was firmly in relation with the Labour Party in England. So, in 1938, just after Subhash Bose comes back to India as President of India, Congress, Pandit Nehru goes to UK, and there he meets Cripps and Attlee at their house. And they have a long conference, and they develop certain kind of proposals as to what could the British offer to India. And part of those offers came back as part of Cripps' proposals, and then which again were repeated in cabinet mission. So a negotiation process was always there. That compromise.
Yeah, but you see, you have to also take into account that, say for instance, Trotsky's party is formed in London, right?
Yeah.
So there's a strong socialist influence in England at that time. There is a whole lot of people who are, leaning towards socialism, towards left and all that. And Pandit Nehru is very comfortable with that crowd. It's not the imperialistic necessarily, what we call.
No, my point is that Labour Party, just because he was comfortable with the Labour Party was not anti-imperialistic. It was not against British Empire.
In their way, but we may be perceiving them as such. I mean, I'm seeing.
So they had interest of Britain in their mind.
Right. So why don't you add something?
I add I'll take off from where you and Chandrachur left. So one, essentially you talked about the narratives, the fight narratives, and this is where this question of why he didn't or he couldn't come out should be taken up. The narrative, we have two, even till today we are having a wars of narratives like in India. So the first narrative is the Gandhian narrative, which is a narrative of the government of India. Modi ji is promoting the same narrative, and that narrative essentially when Gandhi ji met the the viceroy and he articulated in his cow that the aim of my life is to bring peace for the mankind. And that's what most of our intellectuals, and all the people who support this narrative, they stand for. They are internationalists, so they talk about big things about, happening in Western countries. So it's like a very peculiar mindset because it's not concerned with, for example, war crimes being committed in India. Churchill is killing people here, so we don't care, but something happens in Europe, I'm very concerned about it because I'm more closer to them. My family is also settled there. That's one problem, which is very peculiar to the bureaucrats. They always want to, and in fact, most of them have successfully, relocated the families to the Europe and America. So on one side you have this, and the Netaji streak, as Anuj detailed, he was always India first. So my national security, my national interests come first, and Gandhiji and Gandhiji's accolades are all for the world peace. World peace is a jumla which sells. We all like John Lennon. Somehow your glasses remind me of him. But it's one thing to talk of world peace and sing songs, but we know the world doesn't function like that. It doesn't happen like that. All the countries have to have. The problem with now, I was telling you what we were given to understand that government was in touch with him until 85. So this story goes to the so-called Gumnami Baba. So that he was in India, he was in Ayodhya, and he was Subhash Bose and all that. So of course this question was raised with him: why are you not going out? Why this is not happening? Let me start off by giving you anecdote. This happened sometime when Morarji Bhai became the Prime Minister, the first non-Congress government in our country. And the people were in touch with him, and the people who he trusted, and these people know that he was Netaji. So he's sitting with them, and there was a gentleman, Sunil Das, was a revolutionary who lost almost his entire family in the freedom struggle. He was very articulate. He had a paper published in the American Journal of Physical Chemistry back in 20s. Had he pursued that path, he would have, would have done wonderful things to him for his life, for his family. But he suffered a lot because of his family choosing the path of freedom struggle. So he put him a question because he allowed the so-called Baba allowed them to take notes. So these are minutes of discussion available to us. So this is minutes of discussion where Sunil Das puts him this question: why doesn't this government ask you to come out and take your rightful place? And he answers, if I came out, a lot of innocents will die. So that's where it starts. So it's not about the way this question has been couched in, previously, like your way of doing is very, very, very interesting, as it should be, in a very mature way of putting it. But people put it in a very, in a kiddish way. Why was Netaji afraid? It's not about his being afraid or something or the other. He was concerned that if I came out, a lot of innocents would die. He was concerned with his country as a whole. Now, taking it out from where he left. He went out of the country. His allied forces, and so what we were discussing essentially. Now the problem with this man was that he lost the war and he held the Americans responsible for it. The Americans, had nuked Japan. Otherwise, he would have continued. And the American Air Force attacked the INA. So not only the British. So for him, it was an Anglo-American bloc. So he seeks refuge in Russia, which is given to him. And he goes there, and he's there, and then somehow the Russians realize, and if we believe the so-called Gumnami Baba, he was a much bigger personality than we know him. And he was a mastermind, so to speak, in varieties of ways. And that's where he said, beginning when he was there, and he did not like at all what was happening in India. Our national security was compromised long term. He was thinking down 20, 30 years, 40 years. He said the way this transfer of power in India has taken place and the way our security and strategic interests have been compromised, India is going to be in big trouble in near future. And the Cold War would be played out here in India, and it will become hot. And India, being such a poor country, cannot take it. So, and there are multiple reasons, like this, the issue of war crimes, and he thought he was declared a war criminal and was deemed to be war criminal by the other side. So he cannot surface. So what he said was that he began, keeping in mind India's long-term, strategic and other, interest. For example, he was of the opinion that the superpower should keep out of India, and if not in India, they are free to meddle in the affairs of, let's say, the other countries other than India. But as far as possible, they should be kept out, and it should be in our interest to, He said he began cooperating with Russians, in the covert operations. So he talks fantastic stuff. Talks about being sent to Korea to settle score with MacArthur, and then he talks about Laos, Vietnam, and all those places. So he was, in a sense, trapped in those circumstances. And when people would ask him, why are you not coming out? He said, my coming out is not in India's national interest. So he would appreciate, Sadhu Mahatma will not use kind of language. My coming out is not in India's national interest. People would suffer, because of me. There would be sanctions on our country. There would be, demands to, hand me over and try me for crimes or whatever. People would resist. And India is a very poor country, people will suffer because of me.
That was his perception.
So that, let me be here, I'm working for the country, but my coming out will not serve the... At the same time, he kept on trying, and it's a subject matter which probably we will, discuss in near future, that he kept trying, but he was never successful. But essentially the reason why he could not come out, because the circumstances were against him, and circumstances were beyond his control, and has to do with what was happening in Europe and America. And he was the only relic of the Second World War who survived.
But don't you think there could be a tacit understanding between government of India and Russia?
We thought about it, but so far we have found no evidence whatsoever to show that he had any understanding. What we can,
but they have not even released the papers till now, right?
Our understanding is that beginning after Panditji was gone, the government knew where he was. So they were keeping in him good humor. Probably they knew the old man cannot come out. And in that sense, there was an understanding. Before that, there was no understanding. So they were probably keeping in good humor, supporting him maybe in some way, maybe by way of security, because we do see signs of security around him. But not because he himself is very categoric that he is not in any cahoots with the government, because he was very unhappy with them.
No, not him. I'm talking of Russia and India.
No, he doesn't talk about. He talks about his own relationship with Russians at the highest level. I mean, for example, you would find it difficult to believe, but he was talking, for example, Khrushchev, Bulganin, everybody. He said he sneaks out of India, and Khrushchev and I, we go and watch operas. So there's a separate enclosure where Khrushchev and I sit and talk. So he talks about his link to the closest, highest level. And in one letter, he talks that the government of India can try for 7 generations. But Russians will never tell them about me, because I have done so much, for them. They hold me in the highest esteem. So he was claiming that he was in a different ball game.
And when did you think he came back to India?
He came back, the date is anything between 1552, but definitely he was around that time he was here. He was here, and he chose to be in this part of the country. Where we are sitting, he used to be long, because he said, I've seen the Himalayan region like the palm of my hand. So he used to travel everywhere, especially in the Himalayan part. But he remained in this part of the world because it was close to the Nepal border. And because he would, every now and then he would sneak out, and he crossed the border from Nepal. And Russians would take him away, and then he used to go to different places. He used to talk about fantastic, thing which God knows. It's a very difficult thing to explain, but So he chose deliberately here, and because from here he could go out and.
Actually, there was another streak in him which made the whole power play redundant for him, meaningless for him. That was the deepening of the religious
I see.
factor.
Ha ha.
So he was always into tantra sadhana, practical spirituality, ritualistic, all those things. He was into them. He never talked about them publicly too much, but he was into them. But the new appearance that we see from the notes, the minutes, his letters, his discourse after coming to India, it is in a different magnitude. So his insights, his realization. I mean, when he talks about politics, if you read his letters, when he talks about politics, it seems like it has to come from the highest level of statesmen in the world. And when he talks about religion, it looks like it has to come from somebody who has realized a lot of spiritual uh, insights and gained knowledge, deep inside knowledge. And he was traveling. He was traveling to the mutts, to the Buddhist structures in Tibet, and talking about them. He was describing them just the way he was describing. He was not just saying that I am meeting with the Russian heads of state. He was describing how the palace life was, what exactly was going on, how the gulags operated. Many people say that he stole the idea of gulags and torture from Solzhenitsyn's novel. But the fact is that he was describing the gulags 5 to 10 years before Solzhenitsyn's novels came out.
All came out in 73 or whatever. Yeah.
So if all these things and his spirituality, so he was least interested in taking, I mean, being a prime minister of India was of no consequence to him.
Yeah,
But I mean, at the same breath, he also said that, see, if I come out, if I step out, these guys who are in power today, probably they would step aside and make way for me. But they will hold a grudge against me for their entire life, that we had to give up power for him. I don't want that.
So this is one part. Now I would like, because I think we are running close to 12:30 or something. So what I now want to explore is one thing, that you see all this has happened now in the last few years after the new government has come into power, 2014, that we have got Netaji's statue in India Gate, and we've got this museum in Red Fort, and the islands have been renamed in Andaman and all that. Of course, there's a political motive behind it, that's obvious. But why did it not happen before 2014, even in, say, Vajpayee ji's time? Forget Congress. I mean, I would like you to respond to even this, that why did Congress government never did it? And why even Vajpayee ji's government never did it? And why is this government doing it? This doesn't satisfy me fully, that they are only capitalizing on it, which they are, of course. But that's not the complete answer. So I would like you to explore that.
Vajpayee is a problem area, because insofar as my understanding goes, Vajpayee probably met our man. So he knew about it, he had a personal connect with it. And Vajpayee ji was talking about Netaji beginning 1960s. Vajpayee ji was also responsible for, just as Modi ji is responsible for such a big honor, so Vajpayee ji was there, Netaji's portrait came in Parliament only in 1978.
78.
They did not allow. The Congress never allowed. So Congress, we should not even talk about Congress. Congress was never wanted him to be. So that's what. So God knows, Vajpayee could not do it. We expected him. Probably Vajpayee felt he will come back to power. Probably he was thinking, once Mukherjee's report is out, we will do something more. But Vajpayee could not do it. So that's be very clear about it. Vajpayee did not do anything. Modi ji, I would say, in his defense, for a start, is that he has because this is how we function. We keep meeting people, talking to them. I understood from a former Chief Secretary of Gujarat that Modi ji is, whatever he may say publicly, privately he has soft corner for Netaji, and which we saw when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. So when people talk of him unveiling statue of Netaji in Rajpath and try to see solely from the, which is also correct. He is a politician, so he will see in terms of political benefits. But don't forget that he also unveiled a statue of Netaji in Vadodara, this political constituency, and he also talked about Netaji when he was a Gujarat Chief Minister. So the message was conveyed to him when he was still the Chief Minister and he was still not the Prime Ministerial candidate. And Modi ji showed interest. And the first meeting, a letter was written by Subhash Bose's family, which we drafted. It was sent to him, and he then gave members of Subhash Bose's family more than 40 minutes or so. And Modi ji was a rock star even when he was in Gujarat Chief Minister. So he showed interest. Now it's a very bit difficult thing to explain, because of course he has seen, or we have met him. We were there when the files were released and decision was made. We could talk to him, and he, obviously he has seen the files. He knows. And we understand. We know that government knows that he was sitting here. Netaji was here. They may not say it publicly, but they know it, and it's a very complex problem for them to handle. So there are two ways of looking at it, as I can say indirectly, like two ways. Modi ji, like his predecessors, it could be Morarji Bhai, who tried little bit. Don't forget, every time in our country we have a non-Congress government, something positive has taken place. Beginning with Morarji Bhai, he was talking about Russia, and you were talking about Russia. Indian government never approached Russians privately. They did, but officially, for the first time, the approach was made when BP Singh was the Prime Minister. So every time we have had a non-Congress government in our country, something positive has happened concerning Subhash Bose. So probably they have, and of course they have seen the files, Prime Minister NS at least, and they are of the opinion that nothing more can be done. It cannot be brought out because the problems, and you bring out a relic of Second World War, and we have these new realities, strategic relations with Americans, with Israelis, and Chinese threat, and you bring out and make a hero out of somebody who was from that part of the world and he was linked to Hitler and all that. It might cause bad blood with the Americans and Israelis in particular. We are very close to both of them now. So we cannot do it, but at the same time, to keep his conscience clear. And Modi ji will say, okay, I cannot do this thing, but I will at least I'll end up doing a lot of other things nobody has done. So at least my conscience is clear. So he's taking these steps. So that's one way of putting at it. The other way was that he's testing waters by incrementally he's raising, his stakes, and maybe he's doing it. I remember talking to somebody, the system, and he was just having just like you and me, and he was throwing off his ideas to me. He said, look, Article 370 was on our, on a radar for last 50 odd years. Don't forget, he said, even Vajpayee wanted to get rid of it, but he could not. Situation was not conducive. Even Modi ji has taken about 6-7 years to do it. So sometimes ऐसा होता है ना कि आपके पास हथौड़ा तो है, मारना है आपने हथौड़ा, लेकिन लोहा गर्म नहीं होता. अब लोहा गर्म कुछ और कारणों से होगा. हथौड़ा मैंने नहीं रखा हुआ, तो जैसे ही मामला गर्म हुआ, इन्होंने हथौड़ा मार दिया. 370 हट गया झटके में. It took them 6 years. He said that this matter has brought to our notice only fairly recently. So give us some time. So that's how. So these are two broad areas, ways of looking at it. Either they will not cross a certain limit, but they will do something else. Like this statue is a big thing actually for us. It has a great significance. And the other way of it, they are probably waiting for the right opportunity at the right time. So we are caught in between these two extremes.
Because you have to appreciate the fact that full disclosure का impact क्या होगा. So we, from the point of our transfer of power, we have our establishment, political powers. They have built up this narrative of India, which you referred to at the very beginning, of Gandhi being at the center, and it's a Gandhian narrative that we are peace-loving, non-violent people.
People seeking peace for the mankind. We are not just limited to India. चाहे यहाँ पे अपने खाने को पेट में रोटी होना हो, घर में पानी आए ना आए, लेकिन दुनिया में शांति हम लेकर आएंगे. So that's the ideal.
That is, we are friendly to the Western powers, and we don't want to annoy anyone. For us, global moral issues hold more importance than our own national interest. So and this has helped a whole generation, not only generation, but generation after generation of people who have been in power to settle themselves very affluently in the country, outside the country, abroad, in our friendly countries. So it is a very, nice hunky-dory relationship, a very feel-good kind of thing, that we are good people, you are also good people, we know. So let's be friends and all. So an equilibrium has been reached, and that has been maintained due to the dominance of a particular segment of bureaucrats and politicians. Right. And that practice has become inherent. It is in our inherent nature. So anybody who comes up, anybody who gains affluence, they look at abroad. I mean, India is fine, but unless they have a home abroad somewhere in the US or in UK, or they can brag that, oh, I just spent 2 months in London, you know. So all those kind of things that to show their link and power and everything. Whenever a crook gets caught in a country, he runs away to England. So these linkages and how this was built and all the people who created this edifice, all 75 years of that story will crumble. And a lot of figures who are revered now will turn out to be villains of the story. And when that is combined with the story of a man who sacrificed his entire life for the benefit of the country and lived under such hardship, when these two are put together side by side, the repercussion, the massive public reaction, nobody can predict what form it will take. So this is something which we always keep in mind. We don't take it lightly. When we were at the beginning, at the starting phase of our transparency campaign under the Right to Information Act, and we challenged the Home Ministry and they refused to divulge the documents, saying the Home Secretary wrote a confidential letter to the Chief Information Commissioner saying that if we make public all documents related to Netaji, there will be massive repercussion. There will be a law and order problems throughout the country, especially in Bengal, and our relations with foreign countries will be spoiled. And these are serious words coming from one of the most powerful bureaucrats. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. He's not talking off his hat.
And this was in which?
This was in 2007.
But subsequently things were released.
But not everything is released. Not
From the day one,
You've been able to see it officially?
No, we have been able to see, but the thing is that what we wanted from the day one, this entire issue of Netaji's mystery is in the remit of intelligence agencies. So we have been from the day one, our demand was to release the intelligence files first. So the government has released the PMO. These are all on
not controversial files.
No intelligence files.
No, but the other files, even you have not been able to see.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Whatever they have released, they have seen that. But the other intelligence files, which of course we have not seen. Of course, how can we see something which is classified?
They don't even acknowledge their existence.
Right. Oh.
Which is a standard practice other countries also, that you don't even and you tell lies. That we can have a separate session on it. They will give out, but you can make out. I mean, I would maybe if we get time in the presentation, somebody did ask me this question in America that I said I have to borrow something from Donald Rumsfeld. So there are known knowns, known unknown, and unknown. So even the Netaji files can be put in these three categories. Known files. So what Modi ji has released are the known files. Then there are known unknown files. So for example, we know there are 77 files of the IB whose description we know, but they are not in public domain. And then there's a third category of the unknown. So these are files, I mean, you can make out if when the so-called Gumnami Baba dies, the American CIA takes note of it. So am I to assume that the IB was sleeping? No, they were, of course, but so they must have been recorded. So these are the things. So we have only the first category of known files have been released, but the known unknown and the unknown files have not been touched, and it's purely on the government's whims and fancies. And another thing which has made our job very difficult is the issue you must have understood by now. It's fairly complex. It's something which is cannot be readily understood, especially when
there is no 2-minute answer to.
It's not a 2-minute answer. In a standard way of discussion, debating. As it happens in the media these days, you're supposed to answer in 2 lines for everything. No, it cannot be. The whole story cannot be unraveled.
And it's complex.
It's
there are so many
complex.
nuanced. This thing. I was telling you that I come from a very different kind of a background, but I've had many experiences in life. I've met some amazing people, and one of them being Sri Dharampal. I don't know if you know about him. I'll give you his research work, So, since then, I've started thinking in a very different way. I would say thinking without any framework. Normally, we think through frameworks, whether कोई ideology के framework से, कोई subject के anthropology के framework से, historical framework से, कोई framework से देखते हैं. I've attempted to look without frameworks. And I've also developed a great respect for the ordinary Indian mind. And I feel that this ordinary Indian has been completely neglected since independence. We have lived in a make-believe kind of a world. And none of our so-called great leaders were in touch with the real India. I mean, even though I have great respect for many of them, I do feel that Netaji perhaps was connected with that real India because he also thought without frameworks. He was first and foremost an Indian, and he was a nationalist. There's no doubt about it. He was not caught up with ideologies, maybe for a while, but he then soon came out of it.
Not a prisoner of a
No, exactly. So now I feel that something has happened in the last 8-9 years since this new government is. I'm not talking. I'm not a BJP supporter. I have to say that. I'm not a Modi fan. But I think something, despite whether it's because of their doing or not doing, something has happened that some voices have come up. People like you, the way you are talking and the way you are received, I doubt if you would have been received the same way before 2014.
No, right.
We are not being received even in Calcutta even today.
And also,
no person of your caliber in Calcutta will sit with us for even for 1 minute. You will dismiss it without even listening to us.
And this is not because the government is giving you support.
No.
This is despite that. Now, this is what I'm talking of. What is happening? There are tens of people I know today who are talking a different language. They may not all be aligned, but they're talking differently, which was not possible before 2014.
Actually,
suddenly a space has opened up. So some shift is happening, and I want you to talk about that, what you feel, and with all your research, all your findings, how do you connect with this?
This is more of a realization.
Let me start off with, then you can add, because I will be giving a different perspective altogether. My feeling is about it is the shift is not because of anything that we have done per se. I think the credit goes entirely to the Americans. So they have created two things. They have created internet, and they have created social media. Now, because of social media, the discussion real time can take place without any inhibitions and without any censorship. This was not possible earlier. And because these things, the social media, for example, it's not controlled by the system here, it's outside. System is not able to meddle, into it. And so I think there's free flow information, this relation, and people like us, for example, as you said, we would have been outcast, early previously. Even today, we are not welcome in the high society places. Lutyens still, I have managed here and there, but we have managed, but the high society, the Calcutta Club still does not, think too much of us, because they're still trapped in that era. The change has happened primarily because of the onset of the power of social media, which has, in a sense, made the world much more democratic than it was earlier. Now, see the difference now. A person roaming about in the Central Park of New York, and a person in a field in remote part of India. Both of them have the same Wi-Fi and same data and same mobile phone. And they can access the same information. So I think this, whatever great change that we are seeing in the last couple of years, I personally think the credit goes to Americans. For whatever reason they have created these Facebook, Twitter, it has made it far, far, far easier for us to not only communicate, but to spread our thoughts across the world.
Right. But there's another element to it. This political correctness and political incorrectness. These boundaries were very sharp earlier. What was politically correct? I mean, we were caught in ideologies. Today I see a shift. Of course, what you're saying is extremely valid, and it is important, this social media, spread of social media. But do you think there's a shift in the mind space of people?
It is of course, that you see every day. Every day there's a fight, because earlier the cabal, controlled everything. Now, take for example the media. For example, the Hindi media, it used to be previously, English media was everything. All the advertisements will go to the big newspapers, because they are reaching out to people who are affluent. They can buy stuff and all that. And then suddenly you have the Hindi channels, and Aaj Tak became much more popular, and and it was reaching masses. So now the shift is more towards Hindi media, and so much so that even the English channel debates, it was unthinkable. Must have been they're speaking in Hindi actually. In the English channel debates they're using Hindi. Of course, that's very natural, because we are all Indians. And so this change is because of, I think that it's all pervasive, the thoughts, and people are discussing, because the ease of, I think somewhere down the line, all that we have discussed was there earlier also. But earlier, for example, Ramna Lohia or JP, when they talked about these things, they did not get much avenues. They were not in the system, they were not part of it, so they were not having access to the All India radio to propagate their thoughts. But now it's become much more easier. So the thoughts are going about, and people are intelligent enough to understand.
What about the psychology of people? For instance, when I was young and I was studying in college, IIT, I was there, and I used to find people going abroad, even for 6 months or a year, and when they would come back from America or England, they would have an accent, right?
Yeah.
American or English accent. It's not there anymore.
Yeah, people
You
are.
know, so what has happened that there's a difference I see in a different sphere. Do you see that? And do you see that connecting with what your work? Is it supporting your work?
I would say that because since you mentioned America, I have done several tours of America. I've delivered talks, Netaji and all that, and then I see where you're coming from. People living there for 30 years, they don't have an accent, and they in many ways they are more Indians than we are. So and then they're not only, and they're sitting there, they haven't been able to influence the polity and discourse here. Don't forget, on people on social media, so many of them are not in India. They're outside. They are fear. They have no fear. They have no worries. I will think 100 times before, let's say, now, last couple of days, even the CGI is not spared of criticism. Sitting in my country, I will think 100 times, even raising my voice in front of the session judge. He will put me in jail. But if I am sitting in America, I'm sitting in some other country, I'm not concerned what he or she will do to me. So I think this world has become much more democratic place, and all these voices are now amplified everywhere. They can reach the nook and corner. And that's why all these narratives, which are somewhere hidden, and they have become mainstream. And people like us, we were, if we had met you, let's say 20 years ago, we would have been conspiracy theorists. But today we have become mainstream. So because this is reality, this is mainstream. But because the cabal which was ruling the country, and everything else to them was a conspiracy theory. Only their narrative was the gospel truth. Everybody else is just spinning conspiracy theory. So now we are the mainstream. And the government, the change of government has also helped, because this government is not supportive of the previous narrative. At least the rank and file aren't. In fact, I find there's a disconnect. Insofar as the bureaucrats and the top level ministers are concerned, well, they are same. They are no difference. It's the same Gandhi narrative which is being pushed around by Modi especially. But when it comes to the middle level, lower level, they are 100% they are radicalized. They're not at all supportive. So in fact there's a clash building up. The rank and file is not very pleased with the current dispensation, the way they are going about promoting the continuing with the old dogmas and old theories. So very interesting times ahead for all of us, actually.
Yeah, I agree with him completely that technology has been an enabler. Enabler in the sense it has acted as a force multiplier. Thoughts, ideas which were earlier dormant, people didn't have the courage to challenge the ruling dispensation or the establishment, be it political or media or academic. People were afraid to speak out because they would be victimized in some way or the other. So with the spreading of technology, communication, means of communication, gradually this change has taken place gradually over many years. At least what I have seen, at least 7-8 years before the NDA, before Modi ji came to power. So there was, because I was involved in social media very actively from say 2008-9 onwards, in Twitter, and even before that in Orkut, Facebook and all, I've seen the change gradually. How did it happen? People gradually started speaking up. They picked up fights. There was a clash of ideas. So the people who were doing politics on ground, people who were with different houses of media, they were debating, discussing, coming, not realizing the implication that people always think that what they write or say on social media is counted only by number of likes or views. No, there are silent watchers. People come, read, see and go away. Then they think about it. Their opinions are shaped. So once this volume started building up, there was an inward turn from that global peace hunting towards more inwards. How about India? What are India's interests? Where are we missing? What are we missing? Where are we lacking? What can we do? And then the politics of it came in. That wave of anti-Congress sentiment from particularly from 2010, 11, 12, around that time, and the parallel ascension of, if I may use that word, of Narendra Modi coming up the ladder of BJP and elected and put at the top. So these were working in parallel and reinforcing each other. And when BJP starts building and tries to build a new narrative, it's sort of accidental also, because they are hunting for new icons. So if there one thing only is fixed, is that the Nehruvian architecture has to be displaced, but by what? They are not very sure of it. So they are hunting for icons. So they come up first with Patel. Then they start giving place to somewhat same-facedly, but gradually Deen Dayal Upadhyay name comes up. People didn't know about these things. Then they realize that there is a big opportunity in Netaji. So they start building up, picking up icons and showing them in the, even if not in the proper deserved light, but at least much more than what the previous governments did, previous political parties did. And this further impacted the debate, and there was a cultural shift, an Indic awareness, a regeneration of Indic thought. And the people who were working along these lines, for them also this was an opportunity. So they also became more vociferous. That the production of literature and these think fests and lit fests, which were earlier only the forts of the leftists, left center cabal. Now there was a right-wing competition to it. So through this clash of ideas, now this technology has enabled spreading of it. And now people are becoming more self-conscious, self-aware, aware of the identity, the roots of our identity. People, youngsters, they want to now understand, they don't want to understand history as a subject which is to be studied for marks. They want to really know where I come from, what is my past, what is my heritage, what is my lineage, and where do I fit in, how do I take this forward tomorrow, whether, if say 5 years from now, if Modi ji is not in power, I mean, he has been an enabler of the new ecosystem that is building up, of the new thought process that is building up. I won't say that he is sponsoring it or he is actively championing it, but at least has been an enabler, that we now have an environment where we can freely discuss this, challenge the long established theories, and we will be listened to seriously, intently. So when 5 years down the line, when Narendra Modi is not there, somebody else comes in, will this sustain? That is the question. So what I see is that conflict of ideas, clash of ideas is still going on. I mean, this is something which Subhash Bose liked always to, he was a staunch Hegelian in terms of philosophy. So he always used to say that there is thesis, then there is antithesis, and out of that comes out synthesis. So that the battle between thesis and antithesis is still going on, and we are yet to reach the skill of synthesis, but we are moving in the right direction. And this change has happened. So each strand has taken place separately, technology being the central enabler, and they have reinforced each other at various phases, and it will continue to go in the same manner.
So in a way, you've answered what I was going to ask, but I'd like to ask you as well. How hopeful are you about the future of India?
I'm very hopeful. I mean, I don't want to harbor any negative thoughts about my country's future. So even if I don't hope,
no, being dispassionate about how you see.
I see, as far as my little understanding goes about India's place in the world, etc. I think our next 5 years are very crucial for us, because our biggest problem remains what it is to be the poverty, grinding poverty in the country. Of course, millions of people have come out of it, but India is nowhere close to being a first world country. We see that very often when we step outside our homes and we go outside, then we go to remote areas and see how big a difference is the country is like compared to the Western. Now, I think in the basic challenge is the infrastructure, and the industry. Now, COVID has been in a sense blessing in disguise for us. So the industries are moving out of China, and India is the biggest place where it will be moved into. And who would have imagined that iPhone would be made in India? So it's happening. But on the other hand, the Chinese, of course, are not going to like it one bit. So they will use, because in our narrative, it's very, from the days of Indira Gandhi, everything we pin down and blame on the CIA. They forget Americans are our friends right now. So what we have to worry about is the Chinese intelligence and others, and Pakistanis. The two countries which will be mighty unhappy with the rise of India, Pakistan and China. And the Chinese will not want, say they would want to, give out an image of India, that India is an unstable country, it has got conflicts, it's got fault lines and so forth. So I see there are a lot of people who would be, who are already giving India a bad image. They may be under different guises. So they will continue to do so. But as things stand today, I think the stuff is moving to India. And I see in next 10 years down the line, India will be a very different country from what it is today. It's a huge change. And God forbid it shouldn't happen, if it doesn't happen, because we will be in big trouble if it doesn't happen. But I think my assessment, well, it could be because as I said, I wishful thinking, because I cannot think, I don't want to think otherwise. But I think in next 10 years time, and we have a strong solid government in the center, and I think they're also focused on that part only. So the stability continues. Another term for Modi, I think, would be good, because I don't find any other person of the caliber that he is, and at least in terms of infrastructure and the other, he's taking good decisions. So I'm pretty hopeful. I'm hopeful, and I do not know. Maybe I want to just put in, because I everywhere I bring in my own angle of Gumnami Baba, Netaji, subhash. As he said, Subhash was in the, he used to calculate things and talk about future, predict future. Subhash Bose has done that. But even in this form, when he was here in the guise of a holy man, he used to talk and think about India's future. You will find astonished, you'll be astonished. He actually predicted a lot of things which came true. Like the fall of Russia, the reunification of Germany. He talked about problem, with the Chinese. And so he predicted a lot of these things. So if his reading was and the rise of the right, if his reading was right, if his predictions are true, India is in for a phase which would have its share of, let's say, violence and other rumblings will take place, but eventually India will become the dominant power of the world. That's what, and I would like to, I would love to think that way. Being a rational.
It was that India will enter a golden age, golden era.
Okay. So wonderful. I mean, I would love to talk for another 2 hours. And there's so many strains that one would like to explore, because in front of the camera one becomes a little conscious about sticking to the what has been asked. But there are so many clues you have given me, and I would have loved to explore each one of them. But anytime, some other time. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for having us, because we also find very little opportunities where we are called to talk in detail and discuss the philosophical groundings of the issues that we work on.
Yeah, no, we'll
That's a pleasure.
definitely take it forward. I don't think this is going to be the end. मुझे बहुत आनंद आया दोनों का घोष साहब से और अनुज धर साहब से इंटरव्यू करके, और इतनी सारी इसमें से बातें निकली कि मैं तो चाहता हूँ कि वो सबको एक्सप्लोर किया जाए. उसमें बहुत समय लगेगा, तो मैं ये अंत नहीं मानता हूँ, इसको एक शुरुआत मानता हूँ, और हम इसको आगे ले जाएंगे. आप दोनों का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. और रियल थैंक यू सो मच.